Welcome to the Institute of All Intelligent Life. My name is Allan Keislar. We are continuing our discussion of extraterrestrial spirituality, the nature of God. And as I mentioned in the last class, what we are going to discuss today is perhaps the most difficult of all concepts that I have been introduced to. And I can only say I am not clear about it at all. I'm struggling to understand this idea. But first we'll have a little bit of background, which is not difficult, and then we'll get to the real problem. So first of all, of course, we were all informed already by reading either the Law of One books or other sources that in addition to the original source of everything, that is what the Urantia book calls sometimes the Universal Father, or what the Law of One books call intelligent infinity or infinite intelligence, that in addition to that, Allah, there are also other realities which are infinite, which is not how we usually think, at least not how I usually thought. God is infinite and everything else is finite. But what these other sources are telling us is that in addition to that original source of everything, there is also love, with a capital L, that is the Logos, and light, with a capital L, which is infinite energy. So both these two realities, the Logos or love, is infinite, and also that light or infinite energy is also infinite. So I ask the question, how can this be dealt with? Is this not shirk? Shirk is an Arabic term which means making partners with God. Basically, in addition to God, there is some other deity. So this is the answer that I received. Allah is one. However, as the Urantia book says, ever must God act to break the deadlock of the unqualified unity inherent in existential infinity. So that's a very strong statement, but I'll just explain it for a second. God, or Allah, is one, unqualified unity. But God is infinite, so God is at the same time one and infinite, so God is the one infinity. But there must be something more than just the one infinite intelligence, because, as it explains here, you may say that this is so in order that Allah may know himself in many ways, not just in himself. So therefore, multiplicity exists. So there are many ways that this has been explained by different poets and different myths, but the idea is, and there was one famous American poem which said that God was lonely. God said, I'm lonely. So he wanted to create man, or he wanted to create a human being, or he wanted to create something else besides himself. Anyway, we don't think about Allah as lonely, but in some way or the other, there is a desire within Allah to know more than just himself as the one unity, know himself in other ways also. So now this is the answer that I was given to this question. No one is independent of Allah. Everyone, no matter how omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, etc., is dependent on, everyone, no matter how omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent, etc., is dependent on, is a servant of, and seeks as his or her goal, Allah. So this statement is very, very clear. There may be other infinities, as I said in the last class, mathematically also. There can be more than one infinity. In fact, there can be an infinite number of infinities. So there may be many infinities, many omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent realities, but all of them are dependent on the one source of everything, Allah. So therefore, since everything, even an infinite reality, an infinite being, an omnipresent spirit, other than Allah, is also a servant of Allah. So it doesn't interfere with the idea of the oneness of God to say that there are other beings who are also infinite beings. So Allah is the only one who can never be dependent on anyone or anything else. Allah is the only reality which includes absolutely everything within itself. Allah is the only truth that has no other cause and has no goal but Himself, itself, herself. The shirk problem, therefore, does not arise with the logos or infinite energy. So these two primary realities, in addition to the one, the logos or love, and the light or infinite energy, these two are subordinate to, in one sense, external to, and they are dependent on Allah, and they are servants of Allah, and they seek Allah as their goal. So there really can be no problem with the accusation of shirk that might come up if we are proposing other infinite beings besides Allah. However, and this is where the difficulty comes, I said this is the most difficult part. The shirk problem, therefore, does not arise with the logos or infinite energy. However, the shirk problem is more difficult to avoid when one considers the internal goal of Allah, which is within the one and coexistent with the one consciousness inward. So I said the last class, 3 days ago, that we are going to look at the inside, or the inward view. So we have so far been talking about everything that we've been talking about in this course has never suggested anything about the inward view, or the inward goal, or the Allah within Allah Himself or itself. Everything has been talking about the aspects of Allah, or the emanations of Allah, or the creations of Allah. But now we're going to be approaching a very, very difficult question, and that is this goal of the internal goal of Allah, which is within the one and coexistent with the one consciousness inward in a way that nothing else is. The solution is only in this, that this goal is in every way Allah Himself. So, as I said, this is somewhat, I'm struggling with this idea, but I'm trying to understand what I've been told, namely that Allah has a goal, which makes sense to me anyway. Although Allah is full within Himself, still He has some idea of wanting to achieve something. And not the only thing that it is not that the only thing He wants to achieve is that He's lonely and He wants a companion, or He wants to have man as His creation in order to have an exchange. But even within Himself, there is this same attitude. So is this possible? I doubt it sometimes, but this is what I was told. So I'm going to just keep reading. In other words, this goal is previous, philosophically, not in time. In other words, not previous in time, but previous in terms of philosophical relationship. It is previous to the one's development or use or awareness of free will. Previous to the one's awareness of manyness or otherness. So we discussed this some weeks ago when we first brought up this understanding from the Law of One books, that the one exists in itself, But then there is free will. That is the first development of the One, is an awareness on the part of the One that he or it has free will. And when one becomes aware, when the One becomes aware of that free will, one becomes aware of, the One becomes aware of manyness, becomes aware of others. So what we are being told here is that previous to, not previous in terms of time, but in terms of the relationship of different realities, different eternal realities to each other, previous to the One's development or use or awareness of free will, previous to the One's awareness of manyness or otherness, previous indeed to the differentiation of anything from the One, or its awareness of that possibility. So this goal within Allah is existing within Allah before Allah has any awareness of the possibility of manyness. That's the way it's described. Then the question arises, why do we even mention this goal as a possible cause of the accusation of shirk? Because this goal, which is also in every way the original source of everything, is the only one reality, along with the One, which is not in any way dependent on nor subordinate to anything else, and is even, if anything, superior to the One, due to the One's own internal awareness, even before any expression of free will or choice or awareness of another or manyness, or any other action or thought, that there exists within itself a reciprocation so inescapable and refined that there is no way to define or understand itself without reference to this totally co-equal aspect of itself, co-equal to the extent that the One depends on it as much as it depends on him. So this was a long sentence I just read, and it's beyond my understanding, frankly. I don't think we can really understand this. Certainly we can't understand it with our minds as we've been trained, but I guess I'm trying to think of some example or some other choice of words or some other example from previous ideas that we may have had that could give us some way of approaching this idea. But from what we've just read, in one sense it's not understandable at all. But what I was told is just read this, just listen to this, just meditate on this, and even if you can't understand it, allow the idea to circulate in your mind, and then gradually an understanding may come out of it. So that's all I can say. But we have to really go over it quite a few times. So I'm going to read this again, and then I'm going to type this out and post it on the website, allintelligentlife.com, so you can reread it. Or maybe I'll even post it on my Facebook page. But it's, maybe I shouldn't, because it's so difficult and so easy to misunderstand that if somebody just happens to come across it, they may just get upset and angry, even, because this seems so contrary to everything that we have understood in the past. So how is it possible that there can be something, Allah looking inward and becoming aware of something within himself or within itself that is not subordinate to Allah? All right, I'm just going to try to pick out a couple more phrases from this long sentence that I just read. The reason why this is being discussed here is because we're discussing the nature of Allah, and what we're repeatedly being told, and this is going to come up again and again, that there exists within itself, within the One, a reciprocation so inescapable and refined that there is no way to define or understand itself, that is, for Allah to understand Himself, without reference to this totally co-equal aspect of itself, co-equal to the extent that the one depends on it as much as it depends on Him. So this is, I think, totally beyond our understanding. But let us read this and see if some understanding starts coming. In other words, this is the nature of the one, to include reciprocation within itself. This may be impossible of the human mind to comprehend, for doesn't reciprocation, to the mind, necessarily require two? Yet it is presented to us as an indisputable, if incomprehensible, fact. All right, so these, we have been reading in the Urantia book from solitary messenger who comes from the spiritual sky, from the spiritual world, into this world to give us these messages. We have been reading from the very first chapters of the Urantia book, from this individual who says he has been many times in the presence of the One Himself directly, in the presence of Allah. So these exalted beings are beyond our comprehension, and we are just told by them to just try to imbibe this, is maybe a better word, because we can't understand it, but we can just drink it in. And if it goes into us, then maybe some reaction will happen within our consciousness that will start making sense, maybe. All right, so because for us, when we use the word reciprocation, that requires two. So how can there be reciprocation within one? For us, that doesn't make any sense. But nevertheless, we are told that this is presented to us as an indisputable, if incomprehensible, fact. Nevertheless, it is not incomprehensible if one can only accept it as it is presented. To repeat, reciprocation is the very nature of the one. Reciprocation with itself, if we must necessarily conceive of it in this way. Though this too is inadequate. Perhaps we can only say it is a mystery. It is worthy of repetition, yet one more time, reciprocation is the very nature of the one. So that's the point. Reciprocation is the very nature of Allah. Reciprocation, which we think means there must be two, is unavoidable, it's inescapable. Even within the one, there is reciprocation. It's the nature of the one. This means, to try to understand it from another angle, that the one, by its nature, also wants to have a goal. So this is, again, God has no want, God has no need, God has no lack. So how can God want something? The word want has two different meanings in English. One means it lacks something, so Allah certainly does not lack anything. But also want has another meaning, which is desires. So we sometimes think desire means that it's because of a lack only that we would have a desire. But we have to readjust that idea, because our desires usually come because we lack something. We want something because we don't have it. But Allah has everything, so how can Allah want anything? Well, we have to follow this advice to just listen and see if it starts making sense to us, even if at first it makes no sense. So since that goal can only be the one must have within itself some incomprehensible mechanism in quotation marks, by which it can be its own goal in such a way that it really feels, in quotation marks, to the one that this goal is something it must strive for, that is, that it is something other than itself. In other words, the one must create within its own awareness a sense of another reality that is superior to itself, even though there can be no such reality. This entire activity, in quotation marks, we must explain, exists within the one prior to any activity. or even to any awareness on the part of the One that it has free will, or that anything other than itself exists. One final time we repeat, reciprocation is the very nature of the One. Therefore, prior to any external awareness, the One is eternally, internally aware of its own reciprocation with its own internally generated goal. It all comes down to being able to appreciate the perhaps incomprehensible, in quotation marks, fact that the One, although fully self-contained and self-satisfied, for everything is within it, nevertheless feels the need or has the desire to strive for some greater goal than itself, a feeling that is intrinsic to the very nature and existence of the One. And amazingly or interestingly, because the One is absolute and omnipotent, so everything it thinks or feels has total reality, its internal goal also becomes, in quotation marks, real, that is, eternally has reality, and has its own consciousness and desires, including the desire to have a goal, which is, of course, the One. So, this is, as I said in the last class, I'm struggling with this. So don't be upset if you're struggling with it. This is really a struggle to try to understand, and I think I'm just going to maybe reread those last couple of sentences and maybe break them up a little bit to try to understand what's going on here. It all comes down to being able to appreciate that, even though it's not comprehensible, we have to try to appreciate it, this fact that the One, although fully self-contained and self-satisfied, for everything is within it, nevertheless feels the need or has the desire to strive for some greater goal than itself, a feeling that is intrinsic to the very nature and existence of the One. So one way we can understand this is that we have in this experience, we have the experience of striving for a greater goal than ourselves. So there's something about that striving, it's a feeling rather than an action, I think, that is intrinsic to the very nature and existence of the One. So that sort of desire to strive, or that desire to have a goal, is something that also exists within the One. That's what we're being told. And amazingly or interestingly, because the One is absolute and omnipotent, so everything it thinks or feels has total reality. So this is something that's quite well known, I think, in many different traditions, religious traditions, spiritual traditions, philosophical traditions. The idea is there that anything that God simply thinks or feels has total reality. Sometimes we say God simply says, and it is. As the Urantia book, I think I'm remembering correctly, one of these extraterrestrial books says that the One is so absolute that anything it simply thinks or feels is real. So not only that God says, let there be this, and there is that, not only does he just say, be, and it is, but he simply thinks or feels that it is, and then it is. So therefore, this goal, this internal goal, it is real, because he thinks that he would like to have a goal. So therefore he has a goal within himself. So the internal goal also has its own consciousness and desires, including the desire to have a goal, which is, of course, the One. So is this shirk? That's the question. And the answer is no, because the goal is the necessary generation of the One, and is in every way the One itself. So it's no shirk, because there is only one still, even though it may seem to us that there's two. The Allah himself and the goal, the internal goal. But the internal goal is Allah himself. So, all right. So this goal is the one itself. And even though, as we have explained, the one feels that it is not, a feeling it must have to fulfill its desire for a goal, and its nature, reciprocation, to be a little more accurate, we conclude with the observation that the one feels both that the goal is not itself, or is separate from itself, and that it is itself. And the goal, who is the only ideally perfect, totally independent, and completely self-sufficient worshipper of the one, feels that the very same way, namely that the one is both itself and not itself. So this, when I first heard this, I raised this question again and again. How is this not shirk? This seems to be exactly what shirk is. Usually, of course, historically speaking, shirk was the idea that there are different gods and different tribes in Arabia, 1400 and more years ago. Different tribes had their own tribal gods. And what the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, was making very, very clear, strong statement: no, there is no other God but Allah. All these other gods are fake. They're not independent. They are your creations of your minds. They have no strength, they have no power, they can't do anything. So that was the historical context in which the strong monotheism of Islam was established. La ilaha illallah. There is no God but God. So now we are exploring both two things: God looking outward, God looking towards using his free will to create, we can say, manyness, to create other beings, although again it's not a creation in time, but an existence, eternal existence of subordinate beings who are also infinite. And then, as we just have heard today, internally, God looks within and sees within himself a goal which is himself, but at the same time he has a feeling that it's not himself. So I'm going to end there. Maybe I'll read one or two more of these last sentences again, because I'm struggling to understand this. But let me read one more time the last couple of sentences. So is this shirk? This is a question. And the reason why it's not is because the goal is the necessary generation of the one, and is in every way the one itself. So that's why it's not shirk, because this goal, internally generated is the word that's used here, of the one, is in every way the one itself. So this goal is the one, even though, as we've explained, the one feels that it is not. A feeling it must have to fulfill its desire for a goal. And its nature, reciprocation, to be a little more accurate, we conclude with the observation that the one feels both that the goal is not itself, or is separate from itself, and that it is itself. And the goal, who is not the only, and that goal, the goal of Allah, the internal goal of Allah, who is the only ideally perfect, totally independent, and completely self-sufficient worshipper of the one, feels the very same way, namely that the one is both itself and not itself. So this goal is also a conscious being, which is God, which is Allah. Nevertheless, both Allah and Allah's goal, who is Allah, feel, they have this feeling that the other one is not itself and is itself. Whew. All right, that's about as far as I can go. It's kind of exhausting to me also just to even try to explain these things as I've heard them. So let's see if I can answer any questions. I don't think I'll be able to answer some of the questions, but let me try the best I can. Eid Milanu Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. I wasn't even aware of that. Well, maybe it's tomorrow here in America. That this is the birthday of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. So that's a very special day for this information to be discussed. Mohsen Mubarak is saying, again, Ek nukte vich gul mukti hai. Gul mukti hai. Gul mukti. So, is Punjabi, Ek nukte vich, in one point, Gul mukti hai. Mukti hai. I'm not 100% sure what that means. If it's gul or if it's qul means everything, the totality of everything. Mukdiya or mildiya, I think it means everything exists, or everything is present within the one point. So, I guess that's actually a very, very helpful idea. Thank you very much for mentioning that, because everything does exist within Allah. That's the whole point of the oneness of God, that everything is within God. So therefore, the goal of God would also be within God, even before there's any manyness. Anyway, all right. Akbar al-Abadi, Milad ka Islam se koi taluk nahi. Okay. All right, let's see. Aswa N. Waraich says, you are every bit right. I'm not sure which point you're referring to, but thank you very much. Okay, Aswa N. Waraich says then, what do you have to say about religious extremists, sir? Didn't the teachings of Islam taught us to be good humans first? Then why is there so much intolerance, impatience, and hatred among us? Well, that actually is very much related to this class, so I will discuss this because I understand that there are going to be people that don't like this idea that I just brought up today, and they may be very intolerant of it, and even hate it and hate me because of it, because that's the sort of reaction I had when I first heard it, that this is horrible, this idea. How can you say something like this? So the question is, didn't the teachings of Islam taught us to be good humans first? Then why is there so much intolerance, impatience, and hatred among us? Well, the answer I would give, the very simple first answer, which may be the main answer, maybe the total answer, is that people who called themselves Muslims, but weren't really Muslims, they spread this intolerance and impatience. And it's possible that even enemies of Islam created these ideas and spread them about in the name of Islam. Because intolerance, impatience, and hatred is totally contrary not only to the teachings of Islam, not only to what the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, taught, but it's totally contrary to his own example. So, why is this there? Because people who were against Islam, or people who may have thought of themselves as Muslims, although they were not, people who were fake Muslims, they spread these ideas. No genuine Muslim, no true Muslim could possibly spread hatred and intolerance the way is being done by so-called Muslims today, who are actually enemies of Islam. I've said many times, the Islamic State, ISIS or ISIL, different names it's got, is not an Islamic state, it's an anti-Islamic state. Everything they're doing is against Islam. And I personally am convinced that that organization was created by the enemies of Islam, specifically the American and Israeli enemies of Islam created ISIS. It was not Muslims who created it. All right, Aswa Enwaraich again. We are all the way ready to dig the person who has his, her view or opinion little or more different to our in most of the cases, yes. The Holy Prophet was very tolerant. People had differences of opinion, and that's okay. There can be differences of opinion. But this false idea, if somebody has even a little, a little different idea than us, then they must be kafirs, is totally against Islam. And we have so many examples in the early history of Islam also, the time of the Holy Prophet, and even in the immediate years and decades after him, where people had a lot of differences. They had differences of opinion, they had different ideas about very substantial issues, but they stayed together, they worked together, they helped each other. They didn't declare the other kafirs or unbelievers. They just understood they had some differences, and that's okay. So that's what I've been telling everyone, not only Muslims. Certainly Sunnis and Shias have some differences, but that's okay. You can have your idea, I can have my idea. Let's work together. Let's not fight with each other over that. It's actually the enemies of Islam who are trying to pit Sunnis and Shias against each other. It is the United States secret agency, CIA. It is the Israeli secret agency that's trying to create a war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. They're trying to create wars between Sunnis and Shias. That is not Islam, to have a fight. Just like in the early days of Islam, there were followers of Hazrat Ali who felt that he should be the successor, first caliph or first successor to the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him. And there were others who felt, no, Abu Bakr should be. But they didn't fight and kill each other. They worked together. So if they could have done it then, when there really was a lot at stake, why can't we do it now? And not only Muslims, I say Christians and Muslims should work together. Jews and Christians and Muslims should all work together. Of course, the Zionists will not. The Zionists are against Islam, they're against Christianity, they're against Judaism. But the real Jews and the real Christians and the real Muslims should work together. Not only that, all religions, Buddhists, Hindus, certainly Sikhs, the teaching of Guru Nanak is that all should work together. So we should all realize we are all servants of the same God. We are all co-workers. In the Bible, they talk about the vineyard of God. We are all co-workers in the same vineyard of God. We should all work together. And we should not think of ourselves as enemies just because we have some differences, even though there be big differences. What to speak of little differences. All right. Let's see, I don't know if I can read this because I don't have my glasses here, but Majid Ali Kambo has said in Nigah Naz ki Mazumit Are Toba. I guess this is some poetry. Jo hum Fareb na khaye to aur kya karte. It's by the poem, the poet, is it Arshi Bhopali? I can't read that very well. Please forgive me, but thank you for that beautiful poem. I couldn't understand it all, but I'll just go on. Iftkar Ahmed says, your ultimate inspiration for one who think it's late to define and execute their goals. Okay. Yes, I'm 70 years old, and I'm definitely getting new understandings, very radically different understandings in the last few years. So, all right. Okay, so now Iftikhar Ahmed is explaining Gal, acha, ik gal, which, gal, maybe I was reading it wrong. Let me just a second, if I go back, was it? So I know the word gal, Punjab vich. Gal, acha, gul. I thought it was gul, but it means gal. Ki gal hai? What is the problem? What is the issue? What is the kya baat hai? What is the matter at hand? So, gal mukdi hai. Ik nukte vich gal mukdi hai. And here we have an Urdu translation, I think. Ek nukte mein baat khatam hoti hai. Acha. So mukdi hai means khatam hoti hai. So ek nukte mein baat khatam hoti hai. Gal mukdi hai. So it means that in one point everything is finished, everything is completed. Okay, very nice. Happy Eid al-Milad-e-Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Happy birthday, we're saying, to the Holy Prophet, or have a happy Holy Prophet's birthday, peace on him. And we have some more. Acha, Zakiya Asad. Shukr hai, aapki khansi theek ho gayi. Yes, we're thankful that my cough is okay now. Allah ka shukr hai. All right, I think that's enough, because this is a very, very difficult concept that we were discussing today, and frankly, I'm tired. My brain has been strained by this endeavor to simply understand, or even not understanding, to repeat it. And but anyway, that's what it is. It's tiring, it's exhausting to grapple with such a very, very deep idea. Maybe, I think before I heard this, just within the past week, this idea was told to me, and I think it's what can I say? It's beyond our comprehension. It's beyond the ability of our mind to wrap. In English we have this saying, wrap your mind around it. You can't wrap your mind around this idea. But as we were told, just listen, hear, read. I'll put this up on my website, and then you can reread it and meditate on it. How can God, Allah, have within himself a reality, a goal, which is Allah himself, but at the same time he feels that it's different than himself. Okay, thank you all very, very much for watching and for bearing with me on this difficult topic. Peace be with you.